Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles, back with another great event today. This one is kind of a special event. It's not a senator or a congressperson, but it's members of the Hopium community itself. And joining me today are Deborah Potter from Alameda, New Mexico, and Rachel Poliner from Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome, Deborah and Rachel.
Thank you, Simon.
It's great to have you both here. This is kind of a cool event because we get to discuss a project that we've all been working on in the Hopium community called the Resolutions Project. And this idea came from, originally was something that I floated back in February and March around this letter to America idea that I felt it was important that our political leaders go on record with, like we did with the Declaration of Independence, documenting Trump's injuries, abuses, and usurpations, to use the terms from the Declaration. And in one of the various posts that I did about this, I posted the following, and I'm just going to read it right now for all of you. One thing I think we should be encouraging our locally Democratic controlled legislatures, city and county boards and councils to do is to pass condemnations of Trump, to go on the record on whatever is of greatest concern: embrace of Putin, destruction of the U.S. government, elimination of vital health research, mistreatment of workers, and we'll add the abandonment of the constitutional order. Whatever it is, as we discussed the other day, these kinds of bottom-up public expressions of condemnation, of going on the record very clearly about why what Trump is doing is wrong, dangerous, a betrayal, and a betrayal is very much in the spirit of how we last fought a mad king almost 250 years ago. We must become more comfortable going on the record with our fellow Americans, laying out the case against him, spelling out what our founders called in the Declaration of Independence abuses and usurpations. And so I threw this out there. These are things that we discussed, in Hopium world, right? We often kick around ideas. It's like a big sketch pad, and people take what's useful to them and leave the rest, so to speak. And, turned out that Deborah Potter decided to kind of run with this idea, in New Mexico. And Deborah, why don't you explain what you did?
Sure. Well, I started in Bernalillo County and decided I wanted to submit a resolution to the county commission. And as that idea grew a little bit, it actually went to 2 other counties, but I'm only going to talk about Bernalillo. And what I decided to do was to actually have a draft resolution to submit to the county commission. And I think that's a really powerful way to do it. If you're just bringing them an idea, a concept, or someone else's resolution, then you're bringing them a lot of work. But if you bring them a document that they can revise and move forward, then that's easy for them to say yes. So to get prepared to do that, it's a good idea to look at other resolutions. You need to learn the process. In Bernalillo County's case, the process required a hearing, actually 2 hearings. And you also need to identify your supporters. Who on that commission is going to be most likely to be a sponsor? So I decided to approach the chair. There were four Democrats, 1 Republican. My commissioner was the Republican, so I completely ignored him because I knew we didn't need his vote. So I decided to work with other members of the Democratic Party, with some friends, co-workers, to get this job done, and of course, members from the Hopium community. So I took this draft resolution, and it was called, after it was revised by the county commission, it had a new title, which was Defending Our United States Constitution and the Separation of Powers. So I transmitted the draft by email. I told them why it was important to me. This was, again, to the chair. And I told them what else I was willing to do. I said that I was willing to come to the hearing and testify. I was willing to bring others there. And also, if they wanted to meet, I would do that. So the response was terrific. It was, yes, we want to do this. Thank you for this opportunity. And the sponsor found a co-sponsor, which was the vice chair, and they were the ones that moved it forward. So that's how we got started.
Well, and I think part of the goal of this, I want to be clear to everybody, is why do this, right? Is this make work? Is this important? Our theory is that we want to spawn a national debate about Trump's injuries, abuses, and usurpations. And that what we learned was that in our doing research on this, we learned that during the revolutionary period, our founders and the revolutionary leaders encouraged local communities all across the colonies to detail in their own language what it was about Mad King George and the thing, and they're interpreting their injuries, abuses, and usurpations in order to foster debate and to educate, right? To create local ownership and understanding of why they needed to have independence from England. And so it was a way of creating community buy-in and creating local debate. I mean, part of the whole purpose of this is to create debate, to foster, in a discussion about these things in every single community across the country, blue, red, or purple. Because I think one of the things that's exciting that we'll talk about today, because we're here with people who've passed their resolutions, and we'll get to that in a minute, but we also can be doing this in places where they'll fail because the Republicans will vote it down. But that's also okay, because we're forcing Republican elected leaders across the country to go on record about whether they believe the abandonment of the constitutional order or whatever the resolution is something that they agree with. And so, what was important, Deborah, if I can go back to Deborah for 1 second, Rachel will come to you, is,
Sure.
Talk about how, when this actually came up at the hearing, there actually was a discussion and a debate around the resolution itself.
Yes. So again, it's back to this two-step process. So the first part is, actually, the first part was the oral comments. The first part of the hearing involved that. So I spoke, two United States Marine Corps veterans spoke to invoke their oath of office, and a young law school graduate. And after we spoke, then the sponsor introduced the resolution for the discussion. And then later on in the evening was the actual debate of the resolution, and then a vote to move it forward to adoption. So the debate was very interesting. It was preceded by 4 Democratic county commissioners saying why this resolution was really important to them. And they listed the abuses that they were concerned about in terms of the harm to their constituents that are bringing this forward. They acknowledged us, they thanked us. And after each one of them spoke very passionately, then came my Republican commissioner, who only liked the title of it. He thought defending the United States Constitution and separation of powers was a great statement and didn't like anything after that. And his reasons were he didn't think it was an important thing for the commission to do. We had more important things, and it was just political, and it would make a nice meme, but beyond that, he just didn't see the value. Well, it didn't take long before each one of the 4 Democratic commissioners came back with a vigorous debate. It was very cordial, very formal, and they said, we fundamentally disagree on everything here. And they went through one by one their counter arguments, why the voice of the people is so important. They even talked about the old term, acting locally for global issues.
Yeah.
And it was inspiring. They were just so inspiring. All of their comments were really showing their concern for their constituents. And probably most importantly, there was a lot of emphasis on their oath of office, which every elected official takes to protect not only their state constitution, but the United States Constitution. And it is the supreme law of the land. And the Democratic commissioner said there was no more important work than that.
Well, and I think it's important to remember that these kinds of events get shown on local public access television. They can be seen on the internet. Clips can be made of them and packaged, and to foster greater understanding and education in communities where people have those kinds of resources. So it's not a one-off event, right? This is a thing. These are things that can get press coverage and drawn attention to as we become more sophisticated. Frankly, you were a very early adopter here, Deborah. So you were out there before the rest of us kind of caught up to you. But it's for those who are thinking about doing something like this. If you have organization strength behind you, you can build entire media campaigns around this too. And so there's a lot can be done with this, as if this is something you end up deciding to bring to your local government at whatever level. It can be anything from a city council to a county council, all the way up to a state legislature. I mean, there's no reason why state legislatures all across the country couldn't be implementing something like this. And in fact, Rachel, you introduced it into a large institution, right? The city council in Boston, Massachusetts, not a small place. Talk to us about your experience.
Yeah, and Deborah's story makes me actually want to tell different parts of it. But I want to, if it's okay, I want to back up, because it wasn't just, Simon, what you were saying about the letter to America. Because in fact, I tried that, and I think a number of people tried that. We were seeing some variations of it in the Hopium comment community. But there was a later Wednesday night Zoom when you used the word resolution, and that struck me in a completely different way, because we pass resolutions all the time for 100th birthdays and retirements and serious ones for standing up with Ukraine or whatever. So that was a turning point for me. Okay, that said, backing up further now, because early on, you had made a statement that there are tens of thousands of Democrats in elected office across the country, and we need all of them to be vocal. You had said that, and I'm a local organizer, so I was having a lot of cups of tea with people who are just beginning to come out from under the blanket mode. And some of them were saying, why don't we have a leader saving us? Why I don't like getting involved in local and state. It's only national that matters. And these two things were conflicting. That, of course, democracy isn't just something that happens in DC. It happens at the state and the local level. And I would even say it's a daily practice, like eating healthy, right? That if you believe in democracy, that is an expectation. It's a way of life. It's a community ethic. And so, in fact, you were talking a lot about the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, which I really appreciated. Long ago, social studies teacher. It's like, oh, back to my original documents here, right? Deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That is us. We're the ones who have to save ourselves. And that was in sync with what historians of authoritarianism were talking about, that it's the people who create the pressure for the attorneys general to feel courageous. It's the people who are out there protesting, all that. So, okay. And then you said something else about, this whole conversation. In early March, Congress summoned some mayors to DC to testify about how in the world could we possibly have safe cities when we have immigrants in our cities. And that included our mayor, Mayor Wu. And it was an incredibly inspiring moment. It was like a high point for the city that she testified honestly and with courage and proved the point. The whole city was on a high. And I thought, oh, proving Simon's point. There are elected Democrats in all these different levels that we felt better, that it was better to be brave. Okay, so all of those added up to me sitting at a cafe with my city councilor's chief of staff and sharing Deborah's and sharing another one or two. I had not drafted one, so this is the way that our stories are not similar. I offered, and a couple of weeks later, I checked in thinking, I don't know, maybe they think it's too risky, something. And they were already in the second draft, I think. And then I got involved as well. So we had many drafts later. We had a resolution. My own district city councilor is a workers' rights attorney, so I knew he would be up on all of this. But even the conversations with him were reviewing. The Trump administration has done so many different things that it was a review. Oh yeah, he did that to us too, and that, and that. And then our city council meetings are not open hearings. People can't testify. So the conversations happen before and in between meetings. And so in a sense, I was not happy that the resolution was blocked at the first meeting, which was before the 4th of July. And our particular resolution is framed around Boston and our role in the 4th of July, which is a big deal here. And so I was not happy about that. But I ended up, there were a lot of benefits that for it having been blocked, because I had a lot of conversations. There were other counselors and community members who were thinking about this as something abstract. And then when we would chat through it, it related to how local businesses are experiencing the tariffs. It related to how our immigrant communities are experiencing suddenly not having temporary protected status. It was impacting so many different people in so many ways, never mind that Harvard is here, so many universities are here. And so they saw the connection between all of those local impacts and what those principles mean. And then some of the most heartbreaking conversations were with some of our immigrant neighbors and leaders who came from places with dictators and had been seeing, of course they were seeing what was happening here with people afraid to go to the grocery store, people afraid to take their kids to after school classes. And I might get choked up. And they weren't connecting the dots, right? So I was saying, and they were even saying, and we know we're a test case. And I would say, yes, and Harvard's a test case, and CBS is a test case. And that housing grant he tried to take away, and we sued him over that and got it back. That was a test case. And one of these people, I was on a Zoom with her, and she was looking and looking, and her eyes got wide. And she said, I left, and she named the country and named the dictator, who went after professors and went after journalists and then went after protesters. And I said, yes, that is happening here. And she's here in the United States. It was a big moment. And I think for so many people, right, it's what you talk about on American exceptionalism, but it's a whole different lens when it's someone who chose to be here for that recently. And suddenly are thinking, oh, wait a minute, I've already lived through this. And so the kinds of conversations that came up in community and with counselors were really, really interesting. And I think taught us a lot about more community conversations we have to have. But I also want to talk, but I've been talking a while, and I'm going to take a sip.
It's okay. So let's get to what happened to the resolution. You were all more. It's a cliffhanger. We want to know what happened.
All right. So it took 2 meetings, and we don't have any Republicans on City Council. So it's first a nonpartisan race, but it's also, yeah, we don't have any. But that doesn't mean that people don't have their own reasons, whether it's personality reasons or whatever, for blocking things. So that's something for other people to watch out for. Just because someone's a Democrat doesn't mean that they aren't going to obstruct somehow. And so it finally did pass after 2 meetings. The person who blocked it twice. Okay, but in between there, we had Good Trouble Lives On Day, and we used it. It hadn't passed yet, but we used it. And in a call and response mode, the 3 counselors who were most involved with sponsoring it read aloud passages. That we had the crowd yelling, Boston says no kings, and whereas, right after each paragraph introducing the next. And the crowd knew that they were responsible for the last 2 paragraphs. What I did not know was that they were going to really get into it. They were yelling, yay for the good stuff, rule of law, separation of powers. And they were yelling boo for all the bad stuff, right? All the things that Trump has been doing to the city. And then they were revved up. So when we got to our last whereas, not even the resolve part, but the last whereas, which I'm going to read right now. The people of Boston have shown repeatedly through protests and rallies, large and small, in the city center, in the neighborhoods, in elderly communities and elsewhere, that we expect democracy, respect the Constitution, are willing to stand up for both. Now, therefore, be it resolved. I knew that was actually going to hit people. It totally hit people. They were yelling it. They were, it was really moving. And it's one of those things where when you're typing and you start hitting the keys and you're saying it out loud while you're typing, you know it matters. And that is how it hit people. And so and we also had a blown up version of it that people could sign and dedicate to my grandchildren, so-and-so, for public education, so-and-so. And those were on little Post-its. I'm still collecting more little Post-its. I'll be delivering them because we have that big blown up version is now on the door outside of our city councilor, our district city councilor's office. So everybody who walks by can see it, can add to it. So this is my push, that the point of the resolution isn't just the resolution. As Simon's been saying, it's the conversations. And I would say it's also the community conversations, the activities, helping people understand our connection to history. What people said after that rally and after that whole exercise was that they felt more connected to our history. They had more pride in the city. And really importantly, they felt like they'd gotten a resilience booster shot for their own activism. So that was one of the stories I wanted to tell.
Well, and, amazing story. And I hadn't heard the full story. You need to send us a picture of outside the city councilman's office so we can see. Yeah. So send it in and we can include it in when we release this. And Deborah, I mean, what's happened since, and I think to a great degree inspired by the two of you and the success you had, and frankly your diligent reporting in the Hopium chat. Thank you both for doing that. This lively, fun chat that we have every day.
It is.
It is inspiring many days, is that this has now started to move in other places. And Deborah, you've been very diligent about tracking what's happening. I think we're now over 60 different resolutions moving in 19 states now. This is spread largely because of the inspiration of the two of you.
Yeah. It's actually 20 states and I think 63 or 64 resolutions. And it's exciting because some are very specific, especially about immigration. And California is leading the pack. I think they have 18 resolutions and Massachusetts is coming in next. So the race is on. And we do have some conservative states and conservative areas in purple states like Hagerstown, Maryland, and Idaho. We've got something coming up now in Maine that I hope is going to be promising. So I describe it as the project grew legs and started running.
and listen, there is, for those watching this on the Hopium site, there's a tab called Resolutions Project where you can read up about the history of this, find links to many of the things we're discussing today. But also there's an ongoing chat where people can ask questions of other people who've been working on this. And this has become kind of where, people like Rachel and Deborah can coach people through the process. It's one of the reasons we're making this video, right, is to help people understand. And I think, Rachel, one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is that now this is starting to sort of spread statewide.
Yeah. In
Massachusetts. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm not brand new to organizing. We've been at this for a decade, and we have a Progressive West Roxbury-Roslindale is a chapter of Progressive Mass. So I've shared this with other chapter leaders. We're also an Indivisible group, so I've shared that with the Indivisible statewide network. And so there are people who can pick up on it, who already have groups but that doesn't mean that they already know these processes or how to contact, how to figure out who's an ally. One person asked me, how did I figure out who to go to? And I described my city councilor and knew that he would be easy and his staff would love it. But I asked her about her own town councilors, and she didn't know yet. It's like, okay, there's your next step. If this is the prompt for you to have an iced tea with a city, with a town councilor, so be it. That in itself strengthens democracy. So starting from the absolute scratch, your local officials should know who you are. And there's no reason not to contact them. They live in our neighborhoods. The districts are not that big. So the conversations are starting. Of course, one of the communities that I'm looking forward to is Lexington, of the original Battle of Lexington. They had people in both of these networks. It's like, oh yeah, we have to do this. So we'll see what theirs ends up looking like. Yeah.
Well, and listen, I think that I want to just return to something you had brought up, which is that if we're going to build a national pro-democracy movement that is able to get us to the other side of where we are now, we need everybody rowing in the boat together. And what I think that part of the premise of this was that there were tens of thousands of local Democratic elected officials across the country who we needed to challenge them to rise up, to do more, and to become part of this conversation. Because as you pointed out, the leaders in Washington, D.C., the federal elected officials, are all involved in this conversation every day. But what we learned through this research we did about the revolutionary period is that the localization of the big conversation and the ownership in local towns became very significant. And it was happened through letters of correspondence, as they were called back then, and also through the encouragement of resolutions that came forward and were voted on in local governments. And so part of the premise, everybody, as you think about, could I do this in my own community? And now that I live in DC, I have to put my money where my mouth is and start trying to move this. Although I think my mayor right now, in the middle of our occupation, may be a little bit shy about diving into this. But we all have a way. It is a way for us to give our local elected officials a way of expressing their patriotism and love of country. And in that sense, it's a gift to them, right? And as part of the Hopium theory, is that part of our job in this community is to help elected officials to understand what's expected of them now in this time of national crisis, this unprecedented crisis that we have. Getting involved in these kinds of resolutions, because you pass it once, well, they could come back 2 months later and update it or do another version of it based on new events, because every one of these elected officials across the country are going to be dealing with the downstream effects of Trump's gutting of the federal government, of the big ugly bill that's going to dramatically weaken healthcare in America, of the tariffs that are weakening the economic conditions of every working class and middle class person in America. They're going to be, from a governing standpoint, they're going to be dealing with the downstream effects of what Trump is doing. We might as well be able to help them articulate, connecting it back to our own history, right? Why it is that we need to be standing up for our democracy itself. And so I think this has become, this is something we kicked around, but both of you have brought this to life and really animated it and took an idea and made it real. And I'm wondering, Deborah, what advice do you have for folks who may be thinking about doing this in their own communities?
Well, first off, I'd like to say my reason for why this is so important. And that is, we're all living in this moment in time, just like our founders lived in their moment of time. We're facing similar circumstances. The responsibility is on us. It's our responsibility to defend the U.S. Constitution and the rule of law and our own rights. And that's the driving force from my standpoint. And in terms of continuing this conversation, that's part of getting the press releases or news coverage. In my case, I decided to write a op-ed to the Albuquerque Journal. And what that's doing in Hopium terms is expanding the circle of defiance. So it continues, it doesn't stop there.
Well, and Deborah, just, is there anything, when you look back on your time now, right, having done this and watched this now go to other places. What would be your most important advice? Is that just to put your head down and go get it done? I mean, what kind of counsel would you give to people?
Well, I think you have to learn about your jurisdiction and how they do things. You need to know the process, and you need to identify your supporters both on the board and in the community early on, because these are the people that are going to help you and make it happen. I think you need to follow this process because things can get bogged down and maybe you can help move them forward. Or in the case of Santa Fe, they can move really fast. And only 72 hours was required for a public hearing notice. So you could blink and miss it. So you want to stay in contact with the board, check their agendas, talk to their staff, and follow it. And I would say that you can go ahead and make plans for the press releases, or however you're going to do it. You can call your stations ahead of time. I think Rachel did a lot of work beforehand. I just didn't do that. I was focused more on getting it done. But also, and to thank everyone involved. And your boards will be thanking you. So it was a wonderful process.
Rachel, how about you? What advice would you have for folks? And I do, before I say that, I want to just pick up on something both of you said, is that, imagine if every democratically controlled state legislature in the country dedicated a week to debating, an entire week, right? That they announced that in, the full-time legislatures that were coming back in November, and the week from November 5th through, or the week after the election, or whatever it is, that we're going to spend an entire week debating our own resolutions that we're going to pass for the people of our state, and creating this huge public debate that would be then covered statewide. That would be, you've begun the process and you've lit the fire in Boston, Rachel. But I think the potential for this to become something that is responsive to the gravity of the moment, right? That this can not only sort of the fire burn slowly, but there's ways to do this that could take up days and days and days of discussion in certain jurisdictions if people wanted to dedicate themselves to that, given that this is really important and should be given the same kind of consideration and debate as other major issues that governing bodies debate and consider all the time. And so this could become something, as it grows and as people sort of get connected to it and understand the history of this could become something deeply powerful, as it moves up to bigger and bigger governing bodies, right? That where you can see, and I noticed, by the way, Rachel, that I one of the things I was really excited about is that another Hopium member sent me an email saying, hey, I was on the city of Boston's website. And there it was with the city of Boston, which is the mayor's website. And there was a whole write-up about everything that had happened, by the mayor's own people, right? This wasn't a city council person or one of the individual people, but you saw the mayor of Boston embracing this. And so this is a very powerful concept, I think, for us, because part of our job here in a time when our constitutional system have been abandoned and is under unprecedented threat, is to use the anchor or the levers of democracy in every way that we possibly can to reinforce and strengthen them in a time when they're being challenged. And so, sorry for that aside, Rachel. Let me go back to you and let me have you sort of offer your counsel and advice to anyone who's thinking about doing this.
Yeah. So first, I didn't know that the mayor's team had done that write-up until I saw it linked in your daily newsletter.
Yeah.
So that was, look at that. I have a few things to say. One is the conversations, a lot of them can be one-to-one. There is so much power in one-to-one conversations. So for people who are nervous about speaking in formal hearings, start with one-to-one conversations with community members who might be allies, with county commissioners, city councilors, whoever you're talking to who might be allies. Another piece that I find myself saying all the time is we don't know what will matter. We only know that it won't matter if we don't do it. and that we have learned that every person who shows up at every protest actually matters, that the numbers end up building up and they matter, that each Tesla protest mattered, that each piece of the boycott for Target mattered, that all of these things matter. So an individual resolution might feel like, what can it do? But it's, Simon, what you were saying, it's the buildup, and you don't know what's going to happen until lots of people are doing it. And so that's one of the things that I was conveying to our city council is imagine if this is happening around the country, and that everybody was actually making a record, right? In the same way that the Declaration of Independence was a record of the usurpations and injuries, ours was a record, and it's easy to forget all the things that he has done, right? Each and every week. And so it's important to make that record. There's actually been another resolution since having to do with withdrawing money around climate issues. We are a coastal city. It's a big deal. I imagine that there will be others. And one other thing I want to say is in the hearing where it actually passed, besides our own counselor, Ben Weber, who spoke very strongly about it, and after one of the hearings where it was blocked, within minutes afterwards, Councillor Enrique Pepin, who's from our neighboring district and who had been a co-sponsor, immediately put out an unbelievably passionate statement that anybody can find on Facebook. And he is an immigrant family. And then two more of the speakers in the final hearing where it did pass were Councillor Julia Mejia, who is herself a Dominican immigrant, and Councillor Liz Breeden, who is an immigrant from Northern Ireland. And so to have them newly embracing, right, in their chosen lives, not in the life where I was born with this, in their chosen lives, to live in this system, to speak so strongly and passionately about needing to protect it was really compelling. So shout out to them.
Well, and Lincoln, we're not wrapping up. I want to just make one more comment before we wrap on this, just inspired. But what I just heard is that, there's been this kind of meme in our family that all Democrats do is write letters, right? And this has become a derogatory way of sort of condemning the Democrats for not doing more. And I just want to remind everybody that the Declaration of Independence was a letter, right? And that this process is creating an articulation for people about what's happening to them, as Deborah said, in their own lives and their own, in that to give voice, to give language of the present day about the injuries, usurpations, and abuses by this man, because not all of us are in this every day, right? And that people are living their lives. And this process helps create local voices that are relevant to people's lives in every community, and to make it powerful and poignant to them in their own way, and to give voice. And I'm a big believer. Rachel and I went to the same college, Tufts University. I was an English major there. Rachel, I don't know what you studied there,
History.
But history. I took a lot of history classes. We had great history classes. I've always said that I think everyone should be forced to major in English or history and then something else, right? But I'm a big believer that part of the challenge of this moment, and this is part of the reason I write 7 days a week at Hopium, right, is that we are victims of American exceptionalism. We don't have experience culturally with a leader like Trump. And I think that it's been very hard for many people to believe that it could get this bad, that he could really be the wannabe dictator that he's become, that it sort of can't really be, you got to be kidding me about him attacking Harvard or all the things that he's doing. But here we are. And so part of the reason this project, I think, is so important, and thank you both for your leadership, your patriotism, your love of country, your stick-to-itiveness, right? Your fight, your grit, your resilience to get this done, the inspiration that you've been to others is that, and you have inspired many others, both of you, is that, we have to also learn how to talk about this in ways that are relevant to others in order for us to widen the circle of defiance that we talked about. And so I think this process and the ability to articulate, and in letters, by the way, when senators and congressmen write letters to the White House complaining about something, they are articulating and explaining to the public about things that are going on. And so these letters, these articulations, these resolutions are the first step. They're a critical step to building the kind of pro-democracy movement. They're necessary. They're not sufficient, but they're necessary. And I'm really excited because this is, by the way, this is what our founders learned, right? Which is that they had to help local communities really connect with and articulate how Mad King George and the arrangement of the colonies and the abuse of the colonies was limiting their opportunities in their lives, and they needed to find a better path. And so I'm just very encouraged by this. And I'm also, just to conclude, is that I'm also just deeply encouraged because every generation, as Thomas Jefferson told us in his writings, needed to essentially absorb and take responsibility for the revolution itself and to reinvent it for new times. I mean, he wrote so beautifully about the opportunity and responsibility that every generation had to make this the American Revolution and our independence manifest for their time. And that's, as both of you have said, that's what we're doing here, right? That we are taking these powerful, historic, let's be very clear. The idea of America may be the single most powerful idea in all of human history. It has created more opportunity. The idea of America and the inspiration of our freedom and our fight has been the light that has lit the world and inspired the world for generations. FDR's taking the American Revolution and bringing it to the world through the four freedoms has created a golden age in human history. There's never been a time in all of human history where more people had the opportunity to do than in this period, these last 80 years of the four freedoms. The things we're debating are the things that have created a golden age in human history with no near peer. These are things worth fighting for. This is what we are, Americans. Fighting for freedom and democracy is what we do. And part of it is our job, as both of you said, to allow these incredibly powerful ideas and the visions of our founders and the greatness of our democracy to flow through all of us and to harness that power in order to defeat Donald Trump and MAGA. That's what this is about. Both of you have been exemplars, been leaders. I'm so grateful for your work, and I'm excited to bring it to the broader Hopium community. Thank you both today.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Keep fighting, everybody.